Good. Awesome. All right, cool. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she steals the gear. All these films.
We'll get going here. First of all, welcome. My name is James Bailey. I teach printmaking in the School of Art. It's my pleasure to introduce our special guest tonight, Sean Starwars. Tonight's lecture.
Oh, yeah, see? Just in case you don't know it's me.
Nice.
It's all about subtlety.
You know.
Anyhow, tonight's lecture is funded by the Jim and Jane Do Busy and Artist Foundation. Sean is also working on a print all this week, and he's been working with myself and several of the students, Tressa, Jason, Beth, and Eva and everything. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you to all those guys for helping out. And that's also funded by, in part by the MAC, Montana Museum of Art and Culture. They're giving us some cash in exchange for helping out with Sean here. So anyhow, Sean's coming to us from Laurel, Mississippi. He came in Saturday night, an hour before the Day of the Dead parade. We handed him a banner, and he got to be right in front during the hurricane, which pretty much decimated our entire, steamroller printers. First half of the parade, the video looks great, and then so many things was like total chaos. And people were walking around with splintered PVC piping and 20-pound wet, banners and everything. So, but he persevered. He represented Mississippi very well. So I just want to say that. So Sean got his MFA from LSU, Louisiana State University. He does about 8 or 10 of these Visiting Artist gigs a year, so he's been everywhere. Name it, he's been there. He does a lot of shows, and I think some of the best things about shows, they're in great locations and stuff, but the titles alone start to tell you a little bit. So there's Sean Star Wars, A Ton of Prints, The War on Wood, American Dream, Mississippi Nightmare, Choke the Walls, Vodka People, Hot Dog Party, Jimmy the Pope, and Love American Style. Okay. There's also things like Prince of Palooza and Prince Gone Wild and so forth. So without further ado, I'd like you to help me welcome Sean.
All right. Thank you, Jim. All right. Wow. I've said this earlier today, but I've had an absolute blast since I've been here. It was fun from pretty much the minute I touched down here in Montana. And I'm just really glad to be here, and all the people that have helped. It's been really just special having everybody jump in and lend a hand. So if you'd go ahead and advance, I just have that going. I always start my talks with a picture of my 4 kids, just so that you remember the theory that only good guys have kids. So when you see some stuff you don't remember, that's that good guy that's got those kids. You can go ahead and advance it. All right, so I made a print back before I started grad school called Frankenberry versus the Klan. I made it about a week before school started, or 2 weeks before school started. I went down to Baton Rouge, and I just kind of wanted to get my head together about the idea of living in the Deep South. And so I did that, and I didn't know what was going to come of it. It was one of probably 30 things I had made that semester, and it wasn't really all that special to me, but I was picking up a little bit of positive vibes about it here and there. Some people liked it. And I sent it, back in the old days when they still did these CD-ROMs, right? There was this CD-ROM graduate student something or other at the print conference in Athens, Ohio, right? And so I sent off for that because I always say, do whatever you can do, just say yes to everything. And so I submitted that with about 3 or 4 other images. And I couldn't even get anybody interested to go to the conference with me, and I kind of chumped out too and didn't go. But I also need to say that I've always been a horrible student, and I wasn't really sure about graduate school. I knew I wasn't crazy about living in Baton Rouge, but just the whole thing wasn't really clicking for me. And I was debating whether to drop out of school and become a janitor or something. And, I'm flipping through this catalog, and I see artwork by this guy named Tom Huck, right? And it's these black and white, big, kind of ugly woodcuts, just really aggressive and just kind of just awesome, And it's okay, I'll file that away, And later, that same night, I'm flipping through a catalog, and I see Bill Fick, and he's making these big, kind of ugly release prints too, just awesome stuff. And then I see a catalog that has both of those dudes in there, and I'm thinking, okay, there's some reason to stick this out. There's an audience, there's a possibility that I can do what I want to do, because the environment at LSU wasn't really very encouraging at the time. And so Tom Huck in particular had already become kind of my personal hero and my touchstone. But, this was really back before the internet was really popping, so I didn't have any way of knowing anything else about him other than those catalogs. So you can go ahead and advance it if you would. So that's Tom Huck, and we're at his studio in St. Louis, Evil Prints. But so one day, right after the conference, about a week after the conference, I come home, and back when people still had answering machines, my little red light is kind of blinking over here, and I run up to it, and I press a button. My wife was there. We weren't married at the time, but we hit the button. I'm hoping it's not some other girl calling or something. I'm kind of careful. Not that it would have been, but, trying to. And it's Tom Huck. He's like, hey, Star Wars, this is Tom Huck. We saw your Frankenberry versus the Klan at the conference. Michael Barnes was there. Bill Fick was there, Michael Krieger was there, and pretty much the whole place erupted in laughter when they saw that, and we love it, and I want you to be a part of this project that I'm putting together with Barnes. And I just couldn't fucking believe it, I was like, it was better than a call from the president, And so we played it about 7 or 8 times, and I just, wow, Tom Huck knows that I made a print. I was like, what in the world will happen next, And but I didn't know what it was that he liked. Did he like Frankenberry? Did he like the Klansman imagery? Did he just like, I didn't know what the hell he liked. So anyway, so the next print. So this is what I did. He put together a portfolio print exchange called Culture Rot, and so I pretty much gave him back what I thought he liked about Frankenberry, which, again, the Klansman, the pop culture reference, the Star Wars stuff in there for good measure. But what I like to do is I like to tell stories. But I also like to write stories down to give myself some ideas for future woodcuts. And so I had this story that I put together called Star Wars Come Home about this Klansman that has a pet Dalmatian named Star Wars. And the dog gets lost, right? And they live on this Native American, on this reservation, right? And in the meantime, also, it's been invaded by characters from the Star Wars universe. And so somehow or other, his dog got killed. He's looking for his dog. He doesn't know the dog has gotten killed. But, the Star Wars guys and the Indians, they're fighting each other. And there's all this death and destruction. And he's really just like kind of obsessed with finding his dog. But then he sees that Ms. Pac-Man machine, and he can't help but wanting to sit down and try and beat his all-time high score of 249,580. So, next, please. So then, we'll talk about some of this Native American imagery probably along the way. But that's kind of what I was doing at the time. I learned that you can flip through old magazines, and it's just flipping through old magazines. Or you can flip through old magazines, and you can say it's research, and then people start to respect it. So, in my vast research, I came across this picture of the confirmed least entertaining person in the history of Hollywood, Bob Hope. And I thought, there's somebody that really needs a little spicing up, So I threw the headdress on him, and this print is about that size. It's about 6 feet, 4 feet by 6, whatever it is. But I didn't have access to a press that big. And somebody had told me that at University of South Dakota, they were doing a print exchange of 4 foot by 8 foot woodcuts, right? And so I flipped out over that possibility. And I called them up to see what was going on with that, and they said, no, you're crazy. Nobody would ever do something like that. But we do have a press that big, and we're teaching, we have this workshop called Frogman's Print Workshop, and you ought to come up there and do something. So I decided to go up there, and I made this woodcut, and I was going to print it when I was there. Like I said, I didn't have a press. So I'm cutting, and I'm cutting, and I'm cutting. It's the biggest thing I've ever done in my life, right? I'm cutting, and I'm cutting, and I'm cutting, and I finally finished cutting out Bob Hope. And I throw my chisel down, and I run out to my car. I lived about 3 blocks up the road, And so I zoom up to my apartment, and I run up the steps, and I bust in the door, and I was like, hey, Julie, get in the car. Come on, quick, let's go. And she's like, what's going on? What? I was like, no, come on, get in the car. And so we get in the car, and we zoom back to the studio, and we bust in that door, and I flip on the lights, and I was like, so what do you think? And she's like, those are the smallest fucking ears I've ever seen in my life. So it is important to look at what you're doing every once in a while. Next, please. So, what happened for me, I had found this gigantic stack of magazines at this thrift store for like 5 cents a piece, and they were all these Woman's Day and Family Circle and Ladies' Home Journal and all this stuff going back to the 40s. And I just sat there day after day in my studio without any ideas, just cutting out ads, just kind of filing stuff away. And I kept seeing all this Native American imagery, and it really appealed to me because it was always white people dressed up as Native Americans. you know, and that kind of appealed to me because, you know, I don't have this great tradition in my family. You know, I don't have this heritage that I know about. My father, you know, I know I'm on good enough terms with my father, but I only know a handful of little stories about my grandfather on my dad's side. But I do know that at one point when when my dad was about 13, my grandfather left his family of 4 kids and moved out to California and grew his hair long, started wearing turquoise jewelry and telling everybody he was Native American, which of course he wasn't. And so like that's like kind of my interest in it, you know, but it's always what is the most exciting thing we can do, you know, in this country. And, you know, because Star Wars didn't exist back in the 40s, the best thing you could do is put on that headdress, you know, and become a Native American. So I've always been fascinated by that. Next, please. That became this, you know. It's just a woodcut. That's pretty much all we'll be looking at. Next. So, you know, again, keeping in mind that I'm a good guy, but back before I had kids, you know, I had this advertisement for the Peter Pan peanut butter, and I'm looking at that thing, and I'm like, man, I sure do like that picture, you know? It's like I can't really put my finger on just what it is that's so appealing about it, but, you know, I really could go for some Peter Pan right about now. And, you know, it kind of made sense that back then the man of the house said, hey, look, you know, get me some peanut butter. So, of course, you're going to speak to the man of the house. And, you know, they had dirty old men back then, and they still have them today. So, anyway, next, please. So, that became this. You know, and before, you know, I teach at a high school. I've taught grade school. But before I was a teacher and before I had kids, I seemed to always be sensitive to stories in the news about kids getting hurt at school, you know, kids getting assaulted at school. And it seems like, you know, when you mix these sixth graders that might be, you know, 11 or 12 years old, and then you have the 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds, and when they're kind of running around unsupervised, bad things can happen sometimes. So anyway, so next.
No, wait, hey Sean, what's
Yeah.
on the t-shirts of the...
Oh, thanks for asking. I don't ever talk about that anymore. Those are all different iterations of Mr. Clean. And it was from an ad where you're supposed to come up with what his first name is, you know? And so, like, there's different, you know, is he like Daniel Boone? Is he like Napoleon? You know, is he a Native American? Is he like Big Chief Clean or whatever it is? You know, and I don't know what the turnout was for the, you know, for the best name, but that's what those are. And that's just collaged in there, which I don't do too much of anymore. I'm a real big Mountain Dew collector, but the best ads for borrowing imagery, it seemed like all came from 7-Up, right? And so here's a really nice one. I love that. And that turned into this. And, you know, you're working and you think you're doing something, and, you know, but I'd like to ask you, what do you think, what in the hell is happening with this arm and those hands? I mean, I thought I was really drawing fingers. And anyway, again, you should look at your work from time to time. All right, next, please. So there's this, and that was an ad for Glidden paint. You know, no big deal. It turns into this. And I thought I did a pretty good job with that little dog. All right, next. So this was based on a true story, of course, the Apache Ice Cream Massacre. You know, doesn't get a lot of coverage these days, but next. I did, and we can talk about this later. Don't forget, I'm going to be here tomorrow, you know, and a little bit of Thursday. So if you want to come talk to me about anything I say, you know, remember I'm a good guy, 4 kids and all that. But anyway, I did get in trouble. I would go visit, you know, one school after another, and back when that was all the work that I had was that Native American imagery. I'm not the most sensitive, obviously, when I discuss these things, and, you know, sometimes people take offense to it, and it just wasn't worth the headache. You know, it's like, when I leave here, you're going to go after Jim. Right? But I'm going to be here tomorrow. So, I mean, I'm not going to say anything bad, obviously, but if I said anything that you think is bad, I want to talk to you tomorrow. I mean, that's what I'm here for, right? But a lot of times people don't take advantage of that opportunity, and they go after whoever brought me there, and they, you know, they give them a hard time. And
I'll be
so,
disconnecting my phone tonight.
there you go. Awesome. So, you know, so because I want to see 100 smiles out of 100. I don't want to see 99 big smiles and 1 big frown. So I kind of shifted the way I, you know, what I'm working with anyway. But I found this great set of slides at a thrift store of just some random family vacation photos and all their family pictures from the early 60s to the late 60s. And this is just one of them. But I had written this story based on what I thought was happening in the slides called Jimmy the Pope, about this 8-year-old boy that becomes the next pope, right? And so Jimmy has to go visit his family, and they go, and they're in this is actually a little trailer, as beautiful as that wood looks in there, you know. The mashed potatoes look pretty good, and the fried chicken, pretty tempting. All right, next, that becomes this. Now, somebody asked me one time, they're like, how come there's not really any men in that picture, you know? And so I had to think quick on my feet, and I was like, well, you know, the father got killed in the war. You know, that's him up there on the battlefield. And they're like, well, then why in the hell is he naked? Good question. I don't know. So, you know, you should look at your work every now and again. So Jimmy, you know, even though he's the Pope, he doesn't have a lot of sway, you know. But the one thing that he really wants to do is go see his Aunt Bertha, who is a professional clown. You know, there's nothing really better in the world than a clown if you're 8, unless you're terrified of clowns. And Jimmy likes clowns, and that's his aunt. And he gets there, and she's, you know. It's a little better than the real-life version, but try to remember that dog because he factors into this talk later. All right, next. So there's Jimmy as a baby. You know, he grew up on hot dogs and TV dinners. Okay, next. There's Jimmy. He's getting a little tougher, you know. He's kind of coming into his self. So there he is with his girlfriend and his best friend. And they go into this convenience store or whatever, you know, and they're like, you know, maybe we can convince them to sell us a pack of cigarettes, right? You know, so they kind of hide it by buying some Mountain Dew and a Hostess fruit pie. And, you know, he puts the cigarettes up there hoping that the cashier won't notice. And then his friend whispers over to him, he's like, hey, Jimmy, man, you're the Pope. Make him give them to you. So he doesn't even have to use his money. All right, next. Again, in my research, I discovered that the parakeet isn't what I like to call the Kmart bird, but it's actually this exotic thing that comes from another part of the world. And after World War II, it was more happening than Elvis. And so everybody had a parakeet. And the thing to do, of course, if you have a parakeet, is you have to teach it how to talk, right? So in all of these advertisements, all these photographs, it's always their parakeet's about 6 inches away, and it looks like you're getting ready to bite the head off. And then this is a slide from Jimmy's parents at what looked to be a party, but it's got to be the most boring party in the history of all parties. So next. So I combine that into this. Enough said. Next. So here's a Boston Terrier, right? And when I was a kid, my cousins had a couple of Boston Terriers, and they really just scared the hell out of me, you know, because like they have that heavy breathing, you know, and the pointy ears and the little red bags under their eyes, you know, and it just really kind of evil, you know. And so, of course, Jimmy, who's not based in any part on any people that actually lived, but he's terrified of Boston Terriers, right? And so 8-year-olds in my story get kind of cranky. In real life, you can't make them take a nap. And so Jimmy has to lay down and take a nap in the same room as the Boston Terrier, you know, and so he's really fighting it, and he falls asleep, and he has a dream that the dog tells him to light the house on fire. So anyway, but all I came up with was this for the next woodcut. Next, please. So that's that. Okay, next. So there's a clown. Next. Oh yeah, thanks for reminding me why I got fired from my job teaching art to little kids in the South. So sometimes you forget. Anyway, so I had done this story for this little comic book, a little black and white version of this story of this. I don't really drink a lot, you know. I'm a pretty boring person. I don't smoke, I don't drink very much and everything. But, you know, to make these stories a little bit more adult, you have to at least involve some kind of animal sex. And so, this was all like, you know, back when the priests were all in the news for molesting the kids and everything. And so the pig gets drunk watching TV, and he passes out, and he has this dream that he's having sex with the hot dog. And then in the course of his dream, he wakes up, and he's a lady pig, and the hot dog's turned into a dude. And so he's asking his priest what it means, you know, and then the priest kind of walks him off into the little vestibule to tell him what it's all about. Anyway, I liked that idea enough to make it into a color woodcut, and I did that, and somehow or other, we'll get into that some other time, the kids at my school discovered that I had a website, which I was cool with, but I didn't necessarily want them seeing all the good stuff. And then once they found it, it was all over the place. And next thing you know, I was selling used cars. So, all right, next. So that's just an image that that I made, and we ended up getting to use that for the cover of this printmaking book that Bill Fick and Beth Grabowski put together. And so I was really excited about that. And I got the news of that when I was over in Estonia having just the worst time of my life, you know. First of all, I thought that it was in Pennsylvania. It turns out it's all the way like next to Sweden. So, all right, next please. But there's the book. Okay, next. So, you know, from Jimmy the Pope, again, this is called Jimmy the Pope Has a Posse, and there's all of his friends, and he's holding them back from whatever trouble they're trying to get into. And, you know, sometimes I get lazy, so I was going to put t-shirt designs on all these different guys, and then I was like, how about if I just cut out some words? That's easier. Then I was like, how about if I just don't do anything? So the back row, there's no designs on there. And, you know, so there it says Tar Baby. And the reason I did that was because at one time, Mitt Romney, when he was the governor of Massachusetts, he was he had to get up and talk about this accident that happened called the Big Dig. Anybody familiar with that? This construction thing, and collapsed and people got killed. And so, you know, even though he wasn't working on the site, he had to get up in the podium and say, yeah, that old Big Dig's been just a bit of a tar baby ever since its inception. You know, and so he got all kinds of holy hell over that. And, you know, I was like, well, I'll probably never be governor. What the hell? So, now here's a nice, tender moment. Father, daughter, ice cream, little kid in the back. Don't forget about me. All right, next. It took me a long time to get that guy's eyes just right to be looking down that girl's shirt, right? And I consider that a significant accomplishment in my drawing ability. But you say, why don't you draw more beautiful women? And the reason that's not actually Jay Leno in a wig, but I was looking at a photograph of Marilyn Monroe, if that tells you anything. So I stay away from drawing beautiful women these days. Next. Okay, so back in the old days when I was in my art history classes, you know, and they're showing that early Renaissance stuff where they haven't figured out perspective and all that good stuff. You're looking at the slides, and I'm sitting there thinking, man, that's either a bunch of grapes or a pack of hot dogs. There's the expulsion by Masaccio. That was something that I had to learn to draw when I was just beginning my studies. And it was one of the last things we had to learn about when I was in grad school. So, of course, it stayed with me. And that turned into this. More hot dogs. Can't get in trouble with hot dogs. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, you can get fired. All right, next. So here's another thing that happened in real life. You may remember the story of the mother and daughter that went, it was actually at Disney World. It wasn't at Piggly Wiggly. But they go to Disney World, and they have their fun there that day. And they go back to their room, and they're talking about the day's events. And the daughter says, hey, Mom, the weirdest thing happened to me today. You know, Tigger was kind of fondling me, and I really, really didn't like it. You know. And then the mother said, crazy that happened to you, because the same thing happened to me, too. Tigger fondled me, and I didn't like it that much. But anyway... Anyway, so that went to court, and that was on court TV and everything, but that was based on a true story. It turns out that Tigger was 4 different people over the course of like 7 or 8 different years, you know? And so there was something special about that costume. You know, it's like whoever you were, you put it on, and then you just went wild. So, this is called my first cigarette. Next.
Sean, what's the scale of these?
Oh, those are probably mostly all 32 by 24, 36 by 24, 30 by 20. They're all that size. That's the size I can print at home on my press. You know, so again, without being a big drinker or a big cigarette smoker, or for that matter, not much of a pig owner, in order to like kind of live up to this outlaw printmaker thing, you know, I have to like make it adult themed and give them some whiskey, because the actual photograph is a clown and a pig and a bottle of milk, and who wants to do that, right? So, okay, next. So there's this, another ad for 7-Up, and I was just looking for a person to draw and turn into a clown. And so next, that became this. You know, back when I still was interested enough to look it up on my website, I could find out where people were visiting my site from, what countries, and what searches they were using to get there. And the number one search that led them to this image was, how do I sober up? So I always thought that was kind of fun. So here's like this Bonnie and Clyde ice cream cones or whatever. And it was supposed to be all this death and destruction and hot dog bodies all over the place, right? But instead it just looks like it's frame by frame of that hot dog being thrown out of the front window. Next. So here, this was an ad for Nationwide Insurance, I believe. The kid's a little bit old to be crying about a toy gun being broken. You know, you can't see in that photograph right there, but I know that he's got a little tear on his eye, and, you know, the mom's very patiently trying to fix it. And so that's, you know, that's Nationwide's version. And then here's my version, right? And this is a lot like real life can be sometimes. You know, the kid's still crying. The mom's been drinking all day, but she's not fixing the toy gun. She's loading up a real gun. The kid's in the back with the diaper down there by his ankles, or her ankles, whatever the hell that is. And just when you know it's just going to be a bad day for everybody, it couldn't possibly get any worse, and you look on that TV, and that plane is heading right into the first tower, so it's just going to be a bad day for everybody. All right, next. That's Jimmy's uncle. He's just like this kind of badass guy that can fish all the time. So that turns into this thing, right, which I like all right, but I told you to remember that dog, right? So that's like the same size of that, you know, same scale. Boston Terrier again. I thought I did a decent job the first time. We come to it this time, and people are like, oh, I just love that darling little kitty cat. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you, lady? It's a dog. But you can't say anything. If you can't draw a dog, you can't get me mad about it. So, next. So then there's Zippy the chimp, right? And this was like my beginning affair with chimpanzees, I guess. So apparently he was a very well-known chimp. He was on TV all the time. He had his own books, line of toys, stuffed animals, movies made about him, and all kinds of fun stuff. And so I saw that, and I turned that into this, right? And so that's it. And then here's Zippy as an adult. You know, he's no longer a child star, and, you know, he's cruising around in the limo. He's got his Pac-Man pillow. He's got his Zippy doll, you know, his airbrush shirt, and then the Playboy centerfold spread out in his lap. Just living the life. All right, next. So then here's another one, right? And I'm not even going to bother with that, right? We'll just move on to the next thing, right? But okay, and then there's this one. You know, I found this a calendar. I didn't find the calendar. I wish I found the calendar because I was really curious about what the other months were going to be. But the cover of the calendar was on this website, and it was a chimpanzee with two women that didn't have any clothes on. I was like, man, what are the rest of those months going to be like? You know. But anyway, so that's the best I could do. Next. Somebody told me that if I was interested in putting together a children's book, they could probably get it published. So I kind of was like playing around with that idea for a while. So I wrote this story about a crocodile that it's like 24 hours on his last day at school, you know, before summer starts. So here he is. He wakes up, you know, he's made his bed. He's in his pajamas still, you know, and all right, great. Next slide. So next thing, where's his fucking tail, right? Why is he naked? And in that world where it's all right to be a naked alligator without a tail, how come the father is still dressed up wearing a suit, right? So like it just, none of it makes any sense. You can see why you don't have this book in your kid's collection. All right, next. So he does win a bike for perfect attendance, you know, but like all dumb kids, they don't know how to get home. So he's just riding his bike, and he's just used to doing it on the bus, and so he's lost, and he's in this bad neighborhood, and there's all these rabbits that want to beat him up. Next. He stops and goes fishing for a little bit, you know, with his friend the pig. Next. He's brushing his teeth. Got to do that. Next. He's playing some video games. Can't go wrong with Pac-Man. That's not him. That's just another alligator. They all look alike. Next. You know, when you have 4 kids, you're going to go to a lot of birthday parties, and they all kind of suck because all they give you is either bottled water or Capri Sun, you know, which doesn't really go good with the cupcake. So, you know, it's not a lot of fun. Bogus party. Next. Just woodcuts. There's just a lot of woodcuts. Next. More of woodcuts. Next. I was doing something, well, I thought a different idea for a book was if I did like the alphabet, so like I was going to partner with Yeehaw Industries back before they kind of split up about 2 years ago. So they were going to typeset all these different versions of the letter K for kickbox and kangaroo, but, and so on. You'll see a couple others. Next. Gun control means using both hands. Next. If your name's Sean Star Wars, you're going to do the occasional Star Wars themed woodcut. Next. Next. A gorilla. Next. A goat on a skateboard. Next. More Frankenberry because it did well the first time. Next. I did, Guided by Voices is my favorite band of all time, and pretty much every woodcut I've made since grad school I've made while I was listening to Guided by Voices, and the dude puts out like, 5 or 6 or 7 albums a year. He's just immensely prolific, and, so I was really excited to actually get to do some posters for those guys and to meet everybody, and that was cool. But this was one of them. So next, another Guided by Voices poster. Next, another Guided by Voices poster. Next, bam, another one. That may be it for those. Next. Oh, and then there's this band down the street from where I live, and I'm not really crazy about them, but they have a big following in Alabama and Mississippi. And so we made some posters together, and that's one of them. Next. So then there's this thing, right? And I had cut out that ugly little girl, and I had cut out the anatomically correct neck bone sticking out of the neck, and I had the chin, and that was about as far as I could get with it, and it was just so lame I didn't want to finish it, But I had about this much wood that I just hadn't cut away, like up to the rabbit ears, down to about here. And I had it propped up in my studio, and I'd look over at it for a year or two, look over, I said, man, that thing sucks. What am I ever going to do with it? And then I realized, hey, you got enough wood left to turn it into a rabbit instead of a person. So I like it a lot better. All right, it's still ugly though. Next. Again, in my research, I discovered that there's this brand of cigarettes called Old Gold, and their whole ad campaign at one time was to feature lit cigarettes and animals, right? So one of the best ads was the 2 parakeets perched on their fingers with a cigarette in it, and that's that. Next. In Iowa or Idaho, one of those 2 states, they have depends on where you're from, right? If you're from Idaho, it's in Iowa that this happens. Anyway, there's a lot of sex offending going on in that particular state, and they really didn't know how to solve that problem. So the state legislature got together and they really brainstormed, and someone came up with the idea of, I got it, how about if we just don't let sex offenders give out candy on Halloween? And you're like, man, that'll stop sex offending immediately.
It must be Idaho.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, right? And so, but somebody said, hey, wait, I don't think that goes quite far enough. What else can we do to just really stomp out sex offending right now so no one else will ever get sex offended? And they said, what about if they also can't turn their lights on? And that was their solution. And so it's apparently stopped since then. All right, next. Just a face. Next. Ice cream cone, in case you couldn't tell. Next. I'm living the American dream. I moved down to Mississippi. I was able to buy a house, have a job, support a family. But it's also a nightmare because I am in Mississippi. So, next. Okay, next. A clown, hot dog. Next. Mississippi's #1 in obesity. So this guy's name is Mr. Sippy. All right, next. There's a fox or something and some young mothers. Next. Ice cream cones, can't beat them. All right, next. Another ice cream cone, you gotta love them. Okay, next. Clown. What could be next? Who knows? Next. Frog or toad, his little buddy the snail. All right, next. Local beauty. Next. Snake that's a rock and roll singer of some sort. Next. You have a little bit of success with something once, you go right back at it again. So I did a poster for the Detroit Cobras, and looking at all their gig posters, no one really ever hardly draws any Cobras. So there we go. Next. Goat playing guitar. Next. Cubert. Next. Ming the Merciless loves ice cream. Next. I got to thinking that wouldn't it be funny if the Klansman, you took his hood off and like his head was pointing. So, next. I had these two students a number of years ago, and they would just sit there and talk to each other the entire time. You know, they would ignore me. That's all they did was like stare at each other and talk. And one girl had a really round forehead, and the other girl had this kind of pronounced underbite. So I turned them into goats. Because I like to draw goats. Next. You know, I didn't own any guns until I moved to Mississippi, but this is how we celebrate diversity. So, next. Al Capone. Next. Oh, I was doing a project where I was doing one woodcut a day. I was going to do that for the whole year, and that was leap year, so it was going to be 366 woodcuts. And I got about 75 or 80 days into it, and I realized that like any day I got behind and I had to do 2 woodcuts, the first one might be okay. The second one was guaranteed to suck. And if I did 3, that last one was so horrible we can't even talk about it. So I kind of bailed on that project, but that was how I stay active. There's a hot dog. Next. I like the parakeet, and yet he's feeding him like a chicken wing or something. So, you get desperate for something to like in some of these woodcuts. All right, next. There's a dragon and a diamond ring, from my little alphabet book. Next. A pig. Nothing to say about him. Next. A chimpanzee smoking a cigarette for whatever reason. Next. I love Mountain Dew, so I made a Mountain Dew woodcut. Got to make yourself happy every now and again. Next. A goat playing a banjo. Next. My favorite skateboarder and also one of my all-time favorite artists is this guy, Neil Blender, very creative person. He's really pretty much the first first skateboarder that did his own artwork for skate decks. So he's really important to me. And given how important he is to me and how influential he is to me, you would think that I would put a little more effort into this. But like every step of the way, it just like everything kind of sucked. So everything bombed out. His alligators are horrible. The birds aren't right. And then like the most important thing is like to at least maybe make it look like him a little bit. And like the wood chipped away in his face. And so, but there it is. Next. A banana playing a banjo. Next. A turtle with a top hat. I'm getting the idea here, right? Next. Some birds. Next. More birds. One bird on a skateboard. So here's something that happened, right? I made this when I had another project where I was making one woodcut a week for the whole year, right? And so whatever that particular week was, I did this thing, and I thought, okay, well, good, my week is up. I can move on to the next one. But I was kind of happy with it. I was like, I like the police car, and I like the little ice cream wagon and stuff. And I thought, okay, good, I made something up out of thin air. And then I sit down to dinner, and back when our kids were a little bit younger, 2 years ago, and we still had placemats, those little vinyl placemats, and I looked down, and it's that exact damn composition. And I didn't even know we had it. All right, next. Just a dinosaur. Next. Alligator playing an accordion with a little rat. Another band that I like a lot, 5'8", did a poster for them, so I was happy about that. Next. Alligators. Next. Clowns. Can't get in trouble for clowns. Next. Cat burglar, like him, all right. Next. A gorilla. Next. Steamroller. I was doing a steamroller event out in Los Angeles, and they wanted a poster for it, so I drew a steamroller, and there it is. Next. All 26 letters of the alphabet. Next. A rat riding a pig. Everyday occurrence. Next. Charles Bukowski is my favorite writer, so I guess during the week of May 18th, I made that woodcut. Next. The Siamese twins. They had this great life as circus performers, and then they retired, and they became farmers. They lived in North Carolina, and they both got married. They had a bunch of kids. One week they would spend 4 days at the one wife's house and 3 days at the other. Next week they would spend 3 days at that one and 4 days at the other, and the two women didn't like each other.
They were sisters.
I didn't know that, but all right, good, even better. I don't think they had a chimp, though. Some turtles. Nothing to see here. Next. Trail of Tears. based on the theory that if Da Vinci can do it, so can I. Next. Then also I realized that I'm a psychic printmaker because I made this one week, and a couple weeks after I'm looking at the news on the internet, and there's a story about a dog that brings a human hand home. All right, I was like, wow, man, what else can I predict? Who knows? All right, next. Oh, there we go. This is the end. When prints are outlawed, only outlaws will make prints. Now you know we're done. So.
Any questions for Sean?
Here all day tomorrow. But, I've said the same thing over and over in Elizabeth's classes and Jim's classes over the last 2 days. But, really, basically, I'm here. I love to talk to you guys. So no matter what it is, good or bad, come on up and, chat with me tomorrow when I'm up there just hanging out. So if I said something that you don't like or something you're not sure about, you don't want to ask in front of everybody, just come get me. Remember, I'm a good guy. 4 kids.
John Juan?
Oh, do you have a question? Like,
Are we to assume that every image that you make somehow is valid to you, or are you also saying that are there outtakes? Are there things here that you just are refusing to show us?
there's probably, when I finally decided to bail on that one woodcut a day project, I had done 3 woodcuts, and I posted all 3 of them. Like I was 2 days behind. I got all caught up. I posted the 3, and I normally, I felt it was bad, but I had no idea how bad it was until I saw it posted, and then everybody agreed that it really kind of sucked, And those 2 woodcuts are probably the only 2 that I don't do anything with. And in fact, I cleaned out my studio a little bit ago. I may have thrown them out. If I didn't, it's just because I didn't see them. It wasn't on my mind. So basically, my thing is, and I've been saying this all day in other classes too, is I really would hate to be known for the one, I don't mind having some notoriety for Frankenberry versus the Klan because that's helped me a little bit. But, there's nothing else really like Frankenberry versus the Klan in there, And, there's a handful of clown images and there's a handful of hot dogs, but I wouldn't want to be known as the hot dog guy or something. And so I kind of could never choose one image to represent what it is that I do, And when I have to do that, I really struggle with it, And I've just kind of come to terms with the idea that it's not really about this week or this month or this year, but it's more because it's a lifetime commitment to making these woodcuts, and I'm 20 years into it, and with a little bit of good luck, another 30, 40 years would be crazy, but to think of what that continuum is, it's all of this stuff. And, 20 years is enough. It's not enough, but, 20 years is all right. It's a good start. But, to think of, if you're doing something for 40 years, then that represents something that can't be ignored, is my theory that I'm hoping, And so, I don't know what it is that I'm really trying to do other than I love cutting into the wood. That's my very favorite part, and I like to be able to come up with these ideas for stories and talk about that stuff outside of, outside of a slide lecture or whatever. But it's just a matter of fact is this is what I'm doing, and I can't imagine for a second that, I've been saying over and over, but, I'm gonna get home late Thursday night. I know exactly what I'm doing Friday morning. The minute I get up, I've got it all planned out, and I can't wait to get on it and do it. But I'll be done with that by Sunday, and so I already anticipate jumping into something else on Sunday. I really love it, but each piece isn't that important to me because I know that I'm just going to keep making them, and that's just kind of how I've developed thinking about them over the years. So really, every one of those that I showed you, I probably felt really good about when I made it, but after 6 months or after 6 years, you kind of see things a little bit differently, And so I think that I can draw hands a good little bit better than I did with that one with the horrible arm and the hands, right? But at the time, I thought I was doing just fine, I thought I really had nailed it, but it was so horrible looking. You know, if you're coming to look at a good hand, you're out of luck. You know, but hopefully there's still something happening there with color and just with the energy. And then also, you know, back before the internet was exactly what it is now, it was nice to do a little bit of this kind of pop cultural exploring, you know? And so like the things that I find I wanted to share with other people, but I wanted to do a little bit more than just hold up an ad and say, hey look, I found this ad, and I found this ad, and I found this ad. So instead, those are my springboards for making these woodcuts, but it's really just a chance to talk about old gold cigarettes, you know, because there's some just great ads, you know. So it's like kind of that's what moves me forward too.
A lot of the imagery that you use is very inflammatory, uses of like plan imagery or targeting Native American addresses. And you said you've gotten some feedback about that. Is that something that you're thinking about while you're making the work? Are you intentionally challenging?
Now I would be, but you know, I mean, if I were to do it, I would be now, right?
Okay.
But because I'm interested in seeing what happens next, just minimally though, you know.
I'll do, don't worry.
I think the aliens are here. So, you know, the thing is that like when I came from Virginia down to Baton Rouge, I thought that I was in the South in Virginia. You know, we have a heavy Klan presence down there. It's the South. When I got down to Baton Rouge, Virginia is nowhere near the South, right? And because I had an interest, you know, somebody a long time ago told me about Philip Guston, you know, that I would really do well to look into him. And so the stuff that I saw was this, you know, the last 7 or 8 years of his life, that real heavy-handed Klansman imagery and just that real clunky stuff, and I absolutely love it and kind of absorbed it. And I wasn't interested in doing research into his history, you know, and so eventually I discovered what the full range of his career was and, you know, all the different things that he did. But I was just like kind of connecting with this shape, you know, with just this triangle and with the baggage that goes with it. So when I went down to Baton Rouge, that I knew was like David Duke country, you know, he had just, you know, unsuccessfully run for governor and all this stuff. I was like, you know, I'll go down to Baton Rouge and this will be how I kind of like kick up a little dust, is like, you know, if everybody down there is in the Klan, I'll kind of fuck with them a little bit, you know. But it turns out that nobody cared, right? No, first of all, no one saw it. Secondly, those that saw it just didn't care, you know. And so there's nothing in it for me to do another Klansman image, because it was kind of like that was the end of when I was looking at that kind of stuff anyway, you know. And then with the Native Americans, you know, really it was just looking at advertising and seeing the stuff over and over and over again, and seeing how the same, like there was an ad for Kodak, well actually the ad for Polaroid I think was first, right, in my memory. And it was the same, you know, it was a little white kid with the headdress on and a Native American next to him posing, and the Native American is, you know, typically unsmiling, just kind of sitting there stoically, and the kid is just having the time of his life. And that was the ad from, I don't know, 1953, right? And then there's a Kodak ad from 1973, and it's the same exact thing. You know, it's like, wow, in 20 years there's really almost no progress towards like how we use that imagery and our sensitivities. And I think that a lot of changes obviously have happened probably since about 1983, 1985. It seems like people have like started to make a much more significant effort towards being sensitive to other people, you know, which is obviously a good thing. But I'm just more interested in like the history of the advertising, you know. But what I discovered was, I mean, it just seemed like fertile ground to play around with, right? But what I discovered was I would come do a talk, 1 or 2 people would be unhappy about something that I said, which is always like the same exact talk that I'm doing right now. And it would be grief for Jim, or grief for whoever, obviously, you know, someone else. And so that person didn't deserve that, and that wasn't what I was ever looking for, you know, because like the people that are gonna come and look at my artwork are not the people that I wanna offend. I'm not looking to offend anybody. At the same time, the idea of being offended is pretty strange to me, you know, because almost, you know, I mean, my life is nothing but about my preferences, right? you know, and so like I do get pretty greatly offended when I go into a convenience store and they're out of Mountain Dew, right? Now, not to equate someone be offended, you know, like the stuff with the Redskins and the, you know, the NFL and all that, you know, it's not the equivalent, but just because I'm out of proportion, you know, with my, you know, being upset over something, it's still real to me, you know, and so, you know, like I said, to have to know Tom Cruise's name when I don't know what the hell he's ever been in, you know, you turn on the news, you know, I don't hardly ever watch TV anymore at all, but my example used to be, I turn on the news to see what's happening, and one day it's that dude, Matt Lauer, he's interviewing Dick Cheney. Okay, great, he's the vice president, right? The next day he's interviewing Britney Spears. I was like, how, like, I don't get it. You know, like who in the hell cares what she has to say about anything? Or if you want to know what Britney Spears thinks, then why are you tuned into Dick Cheney? You know? And so like that offends me. You know, and hear music that I don't like when I go into a store, that really always offends me. And you know, going to places, you know, these days smoking is such, I mean I don't smoke, but used to be used to the smell of smoke, right? But now if one person is smoking and a whole, you know, I take my kids to play soccer, that, you know, 2 of them have games tonight, right? We go out there to this wide open soccer fields. If one person is smoking, it pisses everybody off. You know, it's like, how offended can you get over one cigarette when we used to just like breathe that stuff in by the thousands? You know, it's the same person that's mad now that wasn't mad 5 years ago, you know? And so like that whole thing is confusing me. But like I really don't ever look to upset somebody, but at the same time I do know that, you know, there's some things that are gonna tweak somebody just a little bit, and I'm up for that, you know. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but you know, it's all right to, you know, stub your toe, you know, you're awake. All right.
Would you say that absurdity is important to you?
I guess, you know, silliness.
It
Yeah,
seems
pretty much
like
the same.
it
Yeah, you know, I mean, like this, if you guys come over to the next building, you know, come up into the print shop and see what I'm working on. I have a woodcut we're almost done. We'll print it up tomorrow. And it's a guy that has a pet chimpanzee that he has traded Star Wars toys to get, right? And so this chimp is like beating on this life-size R2-D2 with a baseball bat, you know, which is pretty ridiculous. But it's kind of based on an ad I took out in the one ads a long time ago about had a boa constrictor I wanted to either sell or trade for Star Wars toys, right? And nothing good came of that, but I have this idea for this woodcut now, and that's pretty ridiculous. But it sets me up for the next 2 or 3 woodcuts. You know, I could easily go right down and do the next drawing and the next drawing. I'd probably lose interest in doing the 4th drawing based on that little series. But it's just that kind of silliness and just how you work your way out of it is kind of fun for me, you know? So, it's just an excuse to get
beautiful
bright.
mark making in the wood.
Oh, thank you. You know, just have fun with color. I really enjoy, you know, I'm pretty casual about what it is. You know, I mean, obviously we're going through it really quick and all that. But, you know, it's kind of like the lifetime commitment is there, so like the minute by minute commitment isn't that important. It's kind of like marriage. Anything else?
So if you are around tomorrow, we're going to be doing the final plate starting at 3:30 tomorrow. So come up by 4 o'clock, you'll see the magic moment. So, awesome. All right. Everyone's welcome. All right. Thanks, John.
Yes, they're multiple blocks. So like we got 4 blocks. Yeah, pretty much all. I haven't done productively 10 or 11 years because what happens is like
You just said the same thing.
wait all the time. And in the end, you have like 1 or 2 of them left. It's a lot of work. Yeah, I'd say pretty good. They're almost ready to start cutting.
Oh, good. That's what you're.
Bitchin'. It recorded the whole time.
Awesome.